Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the weekly Wednesday for the Financial Freedom newsletter, where every week, every Wednesday, we delve into something inspirational, motivational, something excerpt taken from the Financial Freedom weekly newsletter. Wherever you are, if you're listening on Spotify, on iTunes, Google, be sure to click the like, subscribe, share, comment. And without ado, let's get into the show. Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And today I'm happy to introduce Brian Bogert. He is the creator of the Waste to Wealth method. It's going to be talking about trauma, emotional trauma, entrepreneurship, mindset, and I'm happy to welcome him to the show. So Brian, welcome.
Happy to be here, brother.
Yeah. So tell people about your backstory. You know, one of the tenets is emotional freedom, health freedom, and how you came to do what you do.
Yeah. So I'll try to bring together as many components of a 31-year journey as possible. Reality is, I think it starts in the very beginning, and I think it's important for people to know. I'll move through this relatively quickly, but when I was 7, I was run over by a truck, and my left arm was completely severed from my body. It was reattached. I had 24 surgeries, years of adversity, years of overcoming shifts between mental and emotional pain and spiritual pain that were shut off for a very, very long time. When I was 20, I rebroke my arm, almost lost it again, went through 7 surgeons who were afraid to touch me because of their medical malpractice. And I had realized a lot of the flaws that I had in my approach around just having mental toughness to overcome and to do things at a very high level. I really started to lean further into human connection, and vulnerability and authenticity are the glue that binds human connection. Did that effectively for another few years, but then realized that when I shut off physical pain, because it exceeded my ability to cope when I was age 7, I also shut off mental pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain for 20 to 25 years and didn't know it. And so I've been digging inward in my own life, and I'm often known as the garbage man because I am the creator of the Waste to Wealth method, but I help individuals identify and remove the trash from their past that continues to show up as their biggest problems in relationships, business, life, and health. And the Waste to Wealth method is a guaranteed approach using 5 pillars to allow any individual or organization be able to identify, remove, or transform the waste they don't even know exists within themselves or their organizations into wealth generating approaches that are guaranteed to connect and convert in your life and business. So that's like 30,000 feet compressed into just a few minutes, but we'll I'm sure unpack different pieces of that throughout our discussion today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm always very curious, all of the spiritual work, healer, energetic healers. And so kind of tell, generally you're talking about your, waste to wealth, kind of delve into it just a little bit, and then let people get a taste of it. And then we can talk about, other topics as well.
Of course. So I think what's really important is that we have to start by really understanding like what is trash and what is waste, right? And I'm going to look at it again through an individual's eyes and then also through an organizational set of eyes, because I think they're both important. Trash for individuals is often connected to emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that's generationally inherited and passed down, right? It's things that happen in our first 7 to 14 years of life. It could be a trauma like getting your arm ripped off. It could be a bicycle accident. It could be the way your grandpa looked at you when you were 4 and all of a sudden told you that you loaded the dishwasher incorrectly and you shrunk down in yourself. All these create little micro cellular memory that are tied to an emotional narrative that we then create an intellectual belief for, that we then chase the rest of our lives further validating to confirm, right? Like, because that's how we stay safe. For organizations, it's looking at inefficiencies in the ways that we're leading our teams. It's having entire sales or service teams who are afraid to ask for the sale, who don't know how to ask the right questions to outline if they're even a good qualified patient or client for a business or for a physician's practice, right? At the end of the day, like, we need to understand that leadership and these components are the waste within our organizations. We're never stuck because we have the wrong system and strategies. We're never stuck because we have the wrong tactics. We're always stuck because of the trash from our past or the waste that exists in our organizations. So we need to start to understand that. The very first thing I want everyone to hear out of this is that the trash from your past is not your fault. It just becomes your responsibility once you become aware of it, or you start burying others in yours, right? If you are showing up in front of your team meeting and every time you're coming in after a toxic interaction with a spouse, or you're just driving as fast as you can and not paying attention and almost getting car accidents every single day when you walk in your team meeting and brief, what energy do you think they're going to get from you? They're not getting an open, safe, protected energy that they want to lean into, trust, and be led by. They're getting a tense, low-frequency, anxious energy that's going to prevent them from being able to lean in and remain open to the message that you want your teams to hear. So we need to understand the separation between these two. There's 5 pillars, like I said. I'm not going to blast through them in this moment. We can hit them throughout the course of the conversation, but I will hit the very first one because I think it's important for us to understand. The first one is probably the one that needs to happen before the rest of them, but the other 4 are not necessarily linear. They're more like an infinity that are ever-ending and a constant evolution of self within an organization or as an individual. Okay, but why is awareness so important? Because we cannot be intentional with what we're unaware of. But I want to be clear here. This isn't awareness for just the sake of awareness, and this isn't awareness based on the buzz term of self-awareness, where most people just become more aware of all the ways that they should be judging themselves. No. This is, again, shame and blame are off the table. This is about perspective seeking. This is about becoming aware of you, the things that are within you that are causing you to react instead of respond in moments, that are causing damage to be created, that are causing you and your inability to show up. Could be an example like this, where my wife used to say to me, "Hey, honey, what do you want to do with the kids this weekend?" And my shame filter and my trash from my past would cause me to hear this: "Hey, honey, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father here recently, so what are you going to do to make up for it this weekend?" Right? Not what my wife said, but that's what I'm reacting to, tied to that trash. And what would I do? I'd rattle off the 10 things I've done in the last 4 days to show her I'm a good husband and father, right? Or when I'd be leading my teams and we'd coordinate a meeting and I would be sitting in front of a multi-billion-dollar client with 10 different buyers that we had orchestrated to be at that table to help provide solutions so that we could bring our organizations together. And my team would lean over and be like, "Shh, Brian, you can't talk so fast. You can't talk so loud." And all of a sudden I'm shrinking down, even though I'm the leader in the room and the whole reason everyone is there, I'm not able to show up and actually give everything that they require, right? So either one is trash, but if I'm not aware of that and I can't remove the shame and blame from that so that I can start to be objective about what I can do about it moving forward instead of why I'm like this, then it starts to allow me to move. And so that's probably the highest level for both an individual and organization that we can hit in the time frame.
Yeah. Interesting. I love that awareness, and I'm sure being intentional. One thing that Oprah said was similar to what you said is it's not your fault. A lot of people are wishing things away, and if this hadn't happened, then this, all of this. But how do you get people to move past that, get unstuck, even though traumatic things happen to them, and they think, if these didn't happen, they'd be somewhere else. How do you move past that?
Part of the awareness game is about really understanding those moments where you were impacted, where some of the emotional and intellectual narratives were created, right? So some of it is actually going back to the source of it. But as we go through this, how do we get someone to lean into it, right? I think the first thing that I want to just say is I think there's a lot of people and a lot of organizations that are like, how do I even know if I have trash? How do I know if I have waste? Right? So for an individual, if you feel anything in response to this question, I promise you have trash that's worth unpacking, right? Who's the last person that made you feel like garbage? I've yet to meet someone who didn't have a reaction or a thought or a feeling immediately come to their mind around that. All of us have it, and almost every organization has it. And so how do we get people to then step into it to do the work? When we start to realize that those are the things that we're actually causing ourselves to be stuck in because of our inability to feel, heal, and move forward. It's those same things that we've tried to convince ourselves weren't a big deal. We shoved down for years. Every time the world told us to show up with a smile on because we can't have emotion, right? Put a smile on, we push that down as we push through. We literally pack the trash even tighter. And so what we have to get people to realize is it's not so scary to unpack it. And it's not about causing you to feel the blame and the shame. It's about understanding how to allow you to move through it. Okay. So the other pillars become important in this stage because ownership is another one, right? I have to own the fact that every single time I've reacted, every single time I'm reacting and creating damage, I need to look inward first to be seeking perspective on what was I reacting to? Why in that moment was I protecting? And am I reacting to what's right in front of me or the trash from my past? All of which allow you to separate in that moment and be present in the moment that you need to be in. But ownership is also about seeking repair. So when I would rattle off on my wife that way, and all of a sudden I caused her to get defensive and rattle up, what do I have to do then? Right? I have to be able to own. It's like, man, I reacted to something that wasn't what you said. I did bring an energy into this place. I didn't give you emotional safety, physical safety in that moment. And I've got to be able to own that shame and anger impacted my business, my relationships, my life, my leadership of my teams, my clients, and everything, right? Ownership is like, I've got to own it. But again, it's not owning for the sake of blaming. It's owning for the sake of, hey, if I get into a car accident, I can assume that if I left 2 minutes earlier, I might not have been in that. Now, is that a conscious decision that blames fault? No, but if we can surrender to the fact that everything happens for a reason when it happens, one of my favorite quotes is from Ryan Holiday. There's the event that happens and there is no good or bad without us. There's the event that happens and the story we tell ourselves about it, right? The reality of it is most of the time we're reacting and putting the shame and blame from an inaccurate story that was embedded years ago. And unless we get clear on it and unpack it so we understand it, it will continue to keep you stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Very powerful. When is your definition of healing? I'm trying to get this sense is it basically someone, for example, you can take someone from the worst situation, could be, war or, some, abuse or whatever. And so is it basically they can face the trigger and be unreactive, or is it basically they basically just move on, they recognize the environment and the triggers and they kind of either manage the trigger or they eliminate it completely?
It's both. It's both, to be honest. And I would tell you that it's a progression based on where everyone is at. Healing, to me, I think it's important to understand healing has to exist across all four pillars of self, which are mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, right? For all the physicians that listen to this and this specific area, look, I'm like living proof of the importance of the work that many of you do in the medical profession. I'm here, I'm alive. I've had multiple surgeries. I've had my arm reattached. I've had nerves and veins and muscles moved all around my body, right? Here's the reality. I only healed physically in the very beginning for 20 to 25 years. Okay. Now we could argue, well, it was a physical trauma, so that's what we need to heal. But the reality of it is it has all these other ancillary effects, right? I'd walk out of the hospital and in the very beginning at age 7, people would ask me, what happened to you? And I would tell them I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off. 99% of them would pause, turn to my parents and look to them for validation, which told me they didn't believe me. So completely independent of the physical issue, now I'm getting into a scenario where my own truth isn't being accepted in the world and I'm aware of it at age 7. How many of us have ever felt like we're misunderstood, that people don't understand the message, who we are, what we want, right? And when our truth isn't accepted by those that are in front of us for any other reason, we hide, we put more armor up, we start to kind of move. And so when I said I shut off physical pain, I also shut off, like I said, emotional pain, mental pain, and spiritual pain. I believe that if we don't feel, we don't heal. And for the doctors, you'll love this stat. There's 40,000 brain-like cells in the heart. They're called sensory neurites. They've actually studied this and shown that if you go through the intellectual process of communicating and processing through the patterns of your past alone, that you actually don't heal. Because it's about the mind-body connection. It's about penetrating that armor that's cut us off and caused us to live in our heads out of protection because that's what we can make sense of. It's that times that we've disconnected ourselves from our bodies, but until we get into our body and have the associated emotion and feelings that were caused in those same areas that caused the triggers, we don't actually heal and move. And so it's about having a very clear understanding of self, but also being able to give grace, empathy, and compassion to ourselves by recognizing that, again, 99% of the trash isn't your fault. It was generationally inherited and patterned in from your parents. My wife and I've tracked back our generational patterns 3 generations, right? But we used to believe we were the reason that they were so bad. No, we're 3 generations of cellular memory that's transferred this forward in the environments that we're raised in. But sometimes why it's so hard to escape.
So how do you know, how does someone know when they've healed and when they've done the work, they've read the books, meditative?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to your prior question, which is, so many of us, and I'll tell you, this is for me. I would get triggered, right? I would feel misunderstood. I would have a prospect not buy from me. My team would not get the stuff done that I would deliver. My wife would have any of these things, right? Like that could cause me to feel a low frequency emotional state. I'd get triggered and I would sit and feel that for weeks, months, or years, right? I would just be like on tense all the time. My nervous system was tapped, partially because of the physical stuff that I was going through, but largely because the emotional, unhealed stuff that I was still carrying within me. And so what happens is there is no final destination, only constant evolution of self. There are some things that we will never escape. They will be adversaries in constant pursuit for the rest of our life. And so the key is in those situations to catch it and be aware and in the moment quickly enough so that you're only existing in it for minutes and moments, not weeks, months, or years. Right. So it's about minimizing the amount of time that you have that energetic state that's going to propel outward and cause disconnection and misunderstanding and all these other things in your world. And so there's some that all we can do is minimize. There are others that if we do the healing appropriately, certain things don't even trigger us anymore. Right. So to the whole point of the question, I don't believe there's like this day we just wake up and we're just healed, because I believe that for all of us, we've got our core element of self. And then we have something happen. We get a layer of pain inside of us, right? Every layer of pain that we have creates a coinciding layer of armor. So really what this is a slow process of continuing to go inward deeper and deeper, shedding those layers of armor that are protecting the pain so that we can heal it, and then allowing ourselves to move forward through it. That's the third pillar, is the unpack stage. Unpacking is literally being able to sit in the associated feeling long enough until it points you towards what's important. Not for the sake of just feeling like garbage, but for the sake of understanding. Literally understanding physiologically what happens in my body. Do I feel tension in my throat, my cheeks? My heart elevate? Do I have slowed or increased breathing? Do I feel a wave of heat because my blood flow rushes over me? Any number of these things are physiological elements that help me understand and connect to these different emotions. Again, back to the source. Because when my grandpa looked at me when I was 4 and I had those associated feelings, right? I needed to understand the intellectual and emotional components that were in there. Right? What do I believe about myself? What do I believe about the outside world based in these moments that cause me to feel this way? And when we start to understand them, they don't hold the same type of control over us any longer either. The fourth step is flip your lid. And this is where we can real time catch it. Okay. Because flip your lid has 2 ways to do it. One, real time in the moment, and another time at the end of the day. Okay. So what does flip your lid mean? Literally flip open your lid to your proverbial trash can, lay out all your trash in the light, look at it non-judgmentally yet again, and what is it pointing you towards? Understand what's happening, what happened in the situation in front of you. So real time in the moment, it could look like this. My wife could say something else to me and I could feel a trigger, right? Now that I've done the work, I'm aware of where they are. I've owned them. I can understand them. I've done the work to unpack, so I know what some of the roots are. So now I can sit there and say, hey, babe, I just got triggered by what you said, which tells me that I didn't hear you correctly. So would you mind restating it one more time? And I'll try to calm and hear it more clearly. And if for whatever reason I can't pause this energy, maybe we can pause the conversation and revisit it later. What have I done now? Not created any further damage, which means I don't have to expend more energy going and creating repair, right? Same thing with our teams, the people that we're leading. Conversations can literally be diffused to a place where there is no damage. Flipping the lid is also the review at the end of the day. Right? Many people take out the trash in their houses and their businesses every day, because if we don't, it piles up, it overflows, it gets stinky, it gets heavy, right? But very few people ever look inside to take out the trash or waste within themselves, their organization. And what I want everyone to do is to be able to scan their can on the daily, literally be able to look at this and see what trash came into my world today. When did I get triggered? When did I feel low frequency? When did I feel defeated, unworthy, disconnected, guilty, controlled, perfectionism? Like all of these pieces are byproducts of deeper emotions that have narratives tied to them. But when we flip the lid every single day and we review the moments within we get triggered, now we can get ahead of it and not further commit that to cellular memory by allowing ourselves to go to sleep and have stage 3 REM sleep, put it into memory consolidation, which then means we have to work harder to unpack it later. I look at it and say, if I can flip my lid every day and just reach in and grab out what doesn't serve me, then I don't have to go dig through the dump or the dumpster to find what I need to remove.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you're describing reminds me of like the holidays when you're aware of like, your in-laws or, people certain, then you basically have this awareness and you kind of manage it and manage. But it's fascinating.
But it's the truth, because how many people go into holiday events expecting there to be a certain dynamic or pattern to take place because of their entire life? How many people are like, God, I got to get my armor back up because I don't want to be criticized by my parents again or whatever, right? Like we all have that stuff. It's exactly that. It's about allowing ourselves to realize we don't have to protect ourselves. We're only protecting ourselves from whatever belief systems were formed in inaccurate moments.
Very interesting. How can people contact you and follow you, reach out to you? I know you've got quite a following on Instagram and
if you're a web person, you can go to brianbogert.com. If you're a social media person, it's at Bogert Brian on any channel, including YouTube. We put a ton of free stuff out there. We're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. And whether it's an organization where teams are disconnected, you're not connecting, converting, and growing, or an individual or an entrepreneur who realizes that they just want more out of life, the Ways to Wealth method will help you move.
And what a very fascinating discussion, a lot of new insights. And for all the listeners, Brian's resources will be in the links. And let's thank Brian for coming on and dropping a lot of alpha and a lot of information. So thanks so much, and thanks for coming onto the podcast. I hope you really enjoyed that wonderful, inspirational, motivational piece. Again, wherever you are listening, if you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. We're on everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, Google, Amazon, Audible. And without much ado, be sure to thank this show's sponsors, and we'll see you next time.